And here we are for lab number 3. Now, lab number 3 isn't exactly a lab. This is a simulation. Uh, but we're going to show and walk through the process of deploying a second NSX manager and a third NSX manager for our infrastructure. And we're going to get to this through this link right here in your lab guide. And when you click on this link, it's going to go ahead and pop open a new tab in your browser. So we're not going to do this inside the student desktop. We're going to do this simulation. We're going to run this simulation from your local system, right? Wherever your local system is, your desktop, your laptop, whatever you happen to be looking at. And well, if this ever actually loads for us here, we can go ahead and kind of work through. And there it is. There it is. It just needed to be a little tiny bit more patient. And what we see here is we've got a pre-recorded demo essentially of working through this process, but we are going to have to click on things and kind of drive the demo ourselves. And if we look at this, we're going to go through the preparation, and we're going to deploy a second and a third NSX Manager appliance. We're going to configure a virtual IP address, and so we're going to see all of this as it would work in a lab. But we do have to be very careful about where we click. This is not a live environment. There are some very specific hotspots that we're going to work with. So, task 1 here says click on Google Chrome on the taskbar. So I can click here on Google Chrome on the desktop as many times as I want. It's not going to launch. We have to come here to the taskbar and click. Notice that the steps highlight so we know where we are. So I have to click the username field, and then I click the password field, and I click the login box, and that gets us logged into the vSphere client. And then we're going to come over to the NSX tab, and again, I'm going to click the username and password here and log in. And that gets us into NSX. Now, from NSX, this is really what we want to work with and what we will work with. We want to be logged into vSphere because we want to watch the process and see some of the process, of a virtual appliance being deployed in the virtual infrastructure as well. So, where do we go to deploy more management appliances? Well, we go to the System tab, and here we can go into Appliances. Remember, we looked at this in the previous lab, right, to see the information about our existing NSX Manager node. Well, here we want to go ahead and add an NSX appliance. And this kicks off a wizard where we're going to specify the host name. We're going to specify that we are set to IPv4. Uh, and then we want to plug in the management IP address. So this would be the IP address we use for this second NSX manager. We're just incrementing our manager in IP address by 1. This is going to depend on your IP management structure. What's our gateway? Ours is 172.20.10.10. And then we need to click the vertical scroll bar to move down the page a little bit. We saw DNS and NTP and search domains. Those pieces of information are all pulled from the existing NSX Manager deployment. So you don't have to change them. You can, but you don't have to. We're going to look and see that we're going to deploy a small-sized NSX Manager node, and we want to click Next. Now, the compute cluster, right, not the compute manager, I got to click in the right spot. The compute cluster, we don't want to deploy to the compute cluster object. We want to deploy to the management cluster. So we'll go ahead and select the management cluster. Now, we're going to leave the resource pool empty. We're going to leave the host empty. You can define those if you so desire. And then we're going to go ahead and leave the data store as is. We're going to leave the thin provisioning as is. And we're going to select our network. Now, we want to attach this to our management network. That's going to be PGSA management. That's the port group name, right? The distributed virtual port group. The port group name is PG-SA-management. This would be attached to whatever your port group for management is called. And we'll go ahead and click OK. double check that everything here is right. Nothing changed, so it is. We'll go ahead and hit next. Then we want to go ahead and enable SSH. We want to enable root access. We'll go ahead and plug in a password. Now, as we scroll down, so we click on the scroll bar over here. As we scroll down, we see that the admin username is for admin, and we have an audit or a read-only credential called audit. We leave these checked to say same as the root password. Now that might be a little scary, but if we look at this information text here, right, we're going to set whatever passwords, or reset, I guess, whatever password you define here with what you deployed with the first NSX manager. The idea here is that all three of your NSX manager nodes in your cluster are going to be identical. You don't log into an NSX manager node, you would log into the NSX manager cluster. And so you would need the same credentials on all three of your NSX manager appliances. And we'll reinforce that when we configure the virtual IP address here in a little bit. So we'll go ahead and install the appliance. We'll watch this happen. This may take a couple more minutes than what we're showing here in the real world, and that's okay. But that'll happen, and there we have that. Now, as this is deploying, right, step 21 here says go ahead and go over to the vSphere client. Right, there's SA NSX Manager 02. Right, we can actually see the virtual machine in our management cluster because it's just another virtual machine that we've deployed. So let's go back to NSX Browser, or the NSX Browser tab, and add another appliance. We're going to do the same exact thing. We'll go ahead and click here to populate the name, and we'll add in the IP address and the gateway. And we'll go ahead and scroll down, and we see our DNS and NTP and search domains. We're going to do another small manager. We'll go ahead and hit next here. We're going to change our compute cluster to our management cluster, and we'll go ahead and select our PGSA management network and set that up, and everything looks good here. We'll go ahead and hit next. We're going to turn on SSH, enable root access, configure our password, and we scroll down. We'll go ahead and leave these the same as root and install number 2. Right. So that's going to go do its thing, ticking away. And now we can come over to vSphere and see now we don't just have SA NSX Manager 02, we also have SA NSX Manager 03 that we just deployed. So now we have a 3-node NSX Manager cluster. Now we have a 3-node cluster. So let's go back to NSX. We see our 3-node cluster here in the simulation UI, where we have 41, 42, and 43, our 3 different nodes. We see that our cluster is stable and everything looks great. Right? Now we want to come over here to the Set Virtual IP link and click that. And we want to define a virtual IP address. Now we can do IPv4 or IPv6 depending on what you're running. Here we're primarily using IPv4, so we'll go ahead and just set an IPv4 virtual address. Now, in your environment, in your organization, you'll probably want this IP address to be some kind of associated with some kind of DNS name, so that so that everything just kind of works. You can just point to a name instead of having to remember an IP address, but we probably want to go ahead and have that set. But here we're just going to set an IP address, and we'll click Save. Now at this point, notice we're logged in directly to SA NSX Manager 01, right? Directly into the first NSX Manager appliance. Well, we want to use the virtual IP, so let's go ahead and come up here to Admin, right up here in the upper right-hand corner. Let's log out, and let's go ahead and open up a new tab. And we'll click up here in the browser bar, and that'll open up the virtual IP. That'll plug in the virtual IP, and this is still self-signed. So we'll go ahead and click Advanced and Proceed. We'll go ahead and log in here with our admin and VMware One Bang, VMware One Bang. Just click here, right? It automatically populates and log in. And here we see that that we're logged into NSX. This is everything we're used to seeing. There's nothing unique about this at all, except the fact that we are connected to the virtual IP address rather than to an individual NSX manager. So good stuff there. Right? That's the virtual IP. That's all there is to setting up the virtual IP. Now in task 5, we're going to go ahead and look at what's going on in the cluster from the cluster. So let's go ahead and open up MT PuTTY. And like we did in the lab previously, we'll open up SA NSX Manager 01. Here we're going to walk through that process again. You'll go ahead and have to press a key and hit enter, and press another key for a get cluster status. And we'll go ahead and hit enter here. And we can come and see our different groups that we showed and how there are now 3 entries in each group. Right, so let's go ahead and click the scroll bar and scroll back up a little bit. We see that our get cluster status, our overall status is stable, and our data store group status is stable, and cluster boot manager is stable, and controller is stable, and so on. Everything should be stable at this point. So we go ahead and click at the bottom and scroll back down. We can kind of review everything there, and that's all there is to our simulation. That's all there is to deploying 3 managers. In a real environment, sure, it may take another minute or two because of the deployment and deploying those onto disk. But aside from that, that's exactly what you would do in your environment. So there's lab number 3. Come back. We'll see you in lab number 4.